Hello, we are here this morning to have a conversation with singer and composer Scott Henderson about his recently created piece entitled Ordinary Prayers. Thank you, Scott, for your generosity, your time, and your amazingly beautiful composition.
Thank you, Bob.
As I understand it, you were asked to compose this work as a complement to Mozart's Coronation Mass. Can you tell us a little bit about how that was for you, how it felt as an assignment, and how you developed it to complement the Mass?
Yeah, I'm always honored when asked to write a piece of music, and especially by the Whatcom Chorale. And first, I was asked to write a piece for the performance, and I think I was the one that asked, "Well, what else will be on the program?" And Deb Brown said, "Oh, it's Mozart's Coronation Mass," and I thought, "Oh, great! Nothing like being up against Mozart." On the other hand, it opened up a range of imaginative ideas that I might not have had otherwise, and thinking about the form of a mass and the meditative and celebratory nature of a mass, and all the qualities of it being a public declaration of prayer, really got me thinking about finding a way to express something that could complement that. And that was kind of an exciting stage of thinking about what to write.
As a Whatcom Chorale singer myself, I have sung a lot of masses, and I know that they follow a fairly formal structure. Did that structure make you feel bound or limited in some way, or did it open up possibilities for you?
I believe, at least in my history, having constraints is one of the keys to creative thought. When you realize that you have certain things you need to accomplish, or certain instruments you can't use because there's no violas in town, it opens up a lot of creative avenues that you might not have explored otherwise. When you can't do certain things, it makes you wonder, what can I do? So the mass form actually did that, in that I wanted not to use go back to high school physics, but what can balance a Mozart mass? And I thought an equal mass, right? And so I decided that I would approach it as writing as sort of an alternative mass, a series of prayers, only not in Latin and Greek as in a formal mass, but in conversational English, not meant to be expressed in public, but more meditative, and that led me to the poetry that ended up being the inspiration behind all of it.
So you begin with the text itself as the structure for your composition rather than the notes, let's say.
Yeah. My history is choral writing. That's what I have always done. And again, just from my composer's perspective, composition is so much easier when you have a text, because a text pretty much defines what the piece is meant to say, what it's meant to sound like, even to the musical textures that it can use. A text helps define that. When writing instrumental music, it seems like the choices are infinite, because music doesn't express anything but itself, whereas if you're writing something that needs to illuminate words, then those words really define what the music is to sound like. Back in the 1970s, I met a poet named Jill Bigler. She was a little older than I was, but she knew that I was a composer, and I think, as I recall it, she kind of said, "Well, I've written some poetry, in that sort of humble poet way, and maybe I would be able to set some of it to music sometime. And she gave me a hand-typed, piece of typing paper with a set of 7 poems on them. They were titled Prayers of Ordinary People. And at the time I read them, I knew that I wanted to do something with them. I was too young at that point to imagine, a major piece using all of them, but for her at that time, I set 2 of them to music, and she was a singer and she sang them. And I want to assure you that really not a note of that music exists anymore, and none of it appears in this current setting. I've completely rethought it. But those poems were individual entreaties from very different, unique people, each about a need, a want, a desire, a fear in their lives. And they spoke to me very clearly then, and I have thought through these decades about how I might set them to music. And it's one of those, unlock the door, the sunlight comes in kind of moments when I recalled having this set of poems, and it just seemed the perfect fit for what I was tasked to do.
Can you compare or contrast the series of poems with the various movements of the coronation mass?
Not exactly. A mass takes its source text from all kinds of liturgical and church writings. As I said, it's both in Greek and Latin. And different kinds of masses have different texts, so there's no set mass text. A requiem mass is very different than an ordinary mass. But what I did was I tried to not only organize them musically in the way that a mass might, but I wrote an introductory portion, which Jill Bigler did not. She launched right into the poems. I wrote an introductory part, which I think corresponds to the Kyrie eleison, which opens most mass settings. I feel like I need to read that here, even if it takes a moment. But the Kyrie is Greek, and it means "Lord, have mercy," which to me means "Listen to me, please listen to me." And so my entreaty is, I envision it as voices rising from the earth to heaven, to God, in prayer, individual voices. Musically, I tried to give that impression, but these are the words: Dear God, Father, Mother, Creator, Spirit, I need, I want, I ask, I wish, I cry, I worry, I search, I question, I yearn, I hate, I hide, rebel, repent, rejoice, I wonder, I rage, I judge, I mourn, I love, desire, despair, covet, envy, I suffer, I fear, I need, I pray. All reasons for prayer. And musically, I wanted that sense of rising from the earth. So all the musical motifs rise.
I can feel how that lifts our thoughts to a point where we are beginning a conversation, a very private conversation with God, or our concept of God.
And I wanted the voices of the choir to be the voices of these individuals. And so each is always independent of another. The voices are rarely in sync with each other, until we get to the closing sentiment there, which is I pray, and that's everyone together. I open the piece with this. I close with a very similar piece of music, but instead of these entreaties to God, I've used just the substitution of Amen. And Amen is a very odd word that we assume means that's the end, but that's the literal translation of Amen is I accept this. And it's, in other words, here's what I need, God, whatever you say, whatever you do, however you respond, I accept that. So that's why the closing is called assent. So the opening is entreaty and the closing is assent. And in between are these individual prayers.
It sounds to me as if you've framed your compliment to the coronation mass with parentheses of asking and acceptance. And I would love to hear what develops in between those two ends.
That was really the gift of Jill Bigler's poetry. She actually wrote 7 poems. I used 6 of them because 2 of them were kind of similar. My job, hardest job, was really just putting them in an order that made sense. She, as a poet, she had her own cyclical order in mind. I chose to contrast different people's needs. So the first poem is called How Tired I Am. And just to give you a sense of it, is, oh dear Lord, how tired I am of people. People everywhere I go, talking, pleading, pressing, needing. There's no escape. How much I yearn for solitude, a place to rest my weary head. So here's someone who's overwhelmed by life. Too many people, too many things, too many needs, too many responsibilities. The next poem is called Alone, and the contrast is very sharp. It's alone, alone, alone in my loneliness. I am the only person who inhabits my world. The others pass by, leaving me untouched, unnoticed. Their lives are so full, they have no time for me. So here's someone who is reaching out, trying to find some of those people that the other person is avoiding.
They're very contrasting. How do they contrast musically?
Well, musically, it's from a composer's point of view, it's exactly what you'd expect. The first one is kind of frantic. So all this is coming at them, right? Whereas Alone, I chose something very different. So it's much more meditative. There's a little touch of Las Vegas in the background too. For some reason, it reminded me of sort of an overly sentimental song.
I think you could be very lonely in Las Vegas.
Exactly. The third one is the middle movement of the piece, and it's a lullaby. It's called My Baby Sleeps. My baby sleeps, how hard I pray. I pray for love and patience every hour of every day, through the days and through the years. And when the time of parting comes, let me be strong, let me be brave and hold my tears. This movement is the only one that has a vocal solo in it. I wrote it for Sherry Kahn, a brilliant soprano. With the choir being sort of the vocal bedding, so to speak, as cradle, exactly. It's very delicate. It's very poignant, I think, because it's a sad lullaby, because what she's anticipating is her child growing up and leaving. this piece to me was sort of the peaceful center of the work. Contrasting very sharply again, let's assume that child has grown up and become a rebellious teenager, a rebellious teenager. So the next movement is called Hey God. Hey God, why don't my parents listen to me? Why don't they understand me? Why don't my parents want me near them? Why are we no longer a family? Why don't my parents like my friends? Why won't they listen? Why don't they believe me? It goes on in this sort of angst sentiment. The closing, I think, is great. You know, if they won't listen to me, if they don't hear me, will they listen to you? And I chose sort of a musical vernacular. It builds and becomes probably more anxious as it goes along.
For me, and I imagine this would be true for anyone watching this video, those notes and that percussion, I hear the words in those sounds. Mm-hmm. It's like they are so well matched, and I love that.
Thank you. The next is called The Way of Things. Not all of these prayers, not all of Jill's prayers are entirely personal in nature. And this one is particularly meaningful. It's someone whose worries are not so much about themselves as for the rest of the world. A taste of it. Sometimes the beauty of the world is so painful I want to cry. I look upon this earth and see its perfection. It's to reaffirm my faith in thee, the way of things, the order of the universe, a master plan too vast for man to see. But this, my Lord, is why I want to cry. Why did you create creatures like me, too weak to understand, but strong enough to destroy? So it's about humanity's ability to destroy itself. And the prayer is to somehow understand that. The music is very, I was going to say, it's very much the way I write music. Not, you know, each of these others is very much tailored to the poem. This one, I felt a little more freely creative about how to set it. Again, it's contemplative. There's no answer in it, which is kind of the sad part.
But in that, I hear both beauty and agony.
I hear more of the agony. I do. When she first gave me the poems back in those days, this was the one that I set for her. It was the one that spoke to me most clearly and was the most singing in its writing. You know, not all poetry should be set to music. Sometimes poetry simply doesn't need any music. But this one to me was already in a singing voice. Again, none of that music made it to here, but you can see that it was the most meaningful to me. It's the one I've set. It's the one I've set 2 times now, and it may not be the last time.
Jill gave you these poems back in the 70s, as I understand it. So this has been with you, percolating and brewing for a long time, and now it's been expressed in a way that we get to sing, which is really great.
Exactly. You know, to that note, I'm a little bit of a poetry hoarder. So the fact that they have stayed with me is partly due to the power that they have, and partly due to the fact that I have filing cabinets full full of things that I believe I want to work with someday.
Well, we could look forward to that too.
Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm literally filing cabinets. But I keep coming back to things that I love. I've come back to this year after year in different ways, and just never had the reason to sit down and write. I mean, why composers write. They write because someone wants it. Someone will sing it. Someone will perform it. And so when Deb invited me to write, that's the greatest inspiration of all. Is that someone wants it.
And we as singers and the community as listeners will benefit greatly from it. There's more, right?
One more.
One more.
And this one, if there's a musical joke in the piece, this is it. It's called Slow Down the World. It's not funny, but it strikes a chord in so many. Slow down the world, dear Lord, it's moving far too fast. Give me back the world I knew that didn't keep rushing past me. But now each day it's snatched away and never seen again. Slow down the world, slow down the world, slow down the world, dear Lord. The closing line is, it's useless though, for time will flow and I'll go on somehow. Let me hold on to now. And if any of us have not felt that at some point, where did the time go? Is it summer again?
And the clock was chiming to
and the
remind
clock
us
was and the
that
clock was
time
reminding
is
us.
Moving on.
and so to me, these words had just that little gospel feel. So there's or maybe a little soft shoe, I'm not sure. Yeah. But it closes with that, which is, give me more time.
Yeah. And that brings us around to the Amen.
The Amen, which again is, I accept your decision. I accept. I agree. Sort of that's the way it is.
I think this is going to be a wonderful concert, and thank you so much for creating it and trusting us to sing it.
That's my joy, is being able to hear it and being able to be part of rehearsals. Singing in the chorale has been a joy for many years now.
It's so much more than music. It's a community, mutually supportive human beings doing our best to bring these musical messages to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
But I have to mention to the camera that Scott seems to be working on a new piece, and I think it's going to be brilliant.
Okay, so I was 8 years old. Those were some of my first notes. Notice that I had 4/4 time and I had a 3/3 time, which so far I'm not sure what 3/3 time is, but there it is.
Aw, but it's adorable. Thanks so much, Barbara. Scott.